What if I told you there is a plant that produces 40% more calories per acre than rice? A plant that is the main source of food for nearly 1 billion people on Earth every single day. A plant so resilient it can grow in the poorest soils, survive crippling droughts, and wait patiently in the ground for years until it is needed. You would think a plant like that would be celebrated, that it would be the foundation of our global food system. But you would be wrong. For centuries, this plant was not celebrated. It was feared. It was called dangerous. It was suppressed. And today, even as it feeds 1 billion people, it is still fighting for respect. It is a threat, not to our survival, but to a system that profits from dependency. I am Marcus Thornwood. I have spent my life uncovering the stories of the plants that have been left behind. And today, we are opening the vault on one of the most important and most misunderstood plants in the world. This is the story of cassava. If you have ever had tapioca pudding, you have eaten cassava. If you have ever enjoyed the chewy, cheesy delight of Brazilian pão de queijo, you have eaten cassava. But these are just whispers of its true power. Cassava, also known as manioc or yucca, is the fourth most important staple crop in the world, after rice, wheat, and corn. For hundreds of millions of people in Africa, Asia, and South America, it is the difference between hunger and survival. And here is the incredible part. It achieves this with a quiet resilience that puts our modern industrial crops to shame. While fields of corn and wheat wither during a drought, the humble cassava plant, with its deep roots and waxy leaves, just keeps going. It can produce a harvest in soils so poor that nothing else will grow. And unlike grains that must be harvested and stored, you can leave cassava in the ground for up to 4 years. A living pantry, a guarantee against famine. It is, in every sense of the word, a food security crop. So why was it called a threat? Why was a plant that offers so much security, so much abundance, viewed with such suspicion? The answer is a paradox that lies at the heart of this incredible plant. Because in its raw form, cassava is poisonous. That is right. The root that feeds 1 billion people contains cyanide. Enough cyanide to paralyze or even kill a person if eaten unprocessed. This is the secret of cassava, the twist in its story, and it is the key to understanding both its genius and the reason it was suppressed. For thousands of years, this poison was a mystery. But about 10,000 years ago, in the Amazon basin, the indigenous peoples of South America did something extraordinary. They cracked the code. They developed a sophisticated, multi-step process to transform this poisonous root into a life-giving food. And this knowledge, this sacred technology, was primarily held and passed down by women. Imagine the scene. A group of women working together, their hands moving with a rhythm passed down through countless generations. First, the roots are peeled, then grated into a fine pulp. This pulp is then packed into a long woven tube, a kind of basket called a tipiti. The tipiti is hung from a tree branch, and a heavy weight is attached to the bottom, squeezing the pulp, forcing the cyanide-laced liquid to drip out. This liquid is collected and can be boiled to remove the poison, creating a rich, savory sauce. The remaining dry pulp is then sifted and baked on a hot clay griddle into large, flat breads. This is cassave, a food that can be stored for months, even years, without spoiling. This is not just cooking. This is alchemy. It is a testament to a level of ecological knowledge and human ingenuity that is simply breathtaking. These ancient people did not just find a food. They created one. They took a plant that was armed with a powerful chemical defense, and through pure intelligence and observation, they disarmed it. They chose to cultivate the most poisonous varieties of cassava, the bitter types, because they were more resistant to pests and produced a bigger harvest. They did the hard work because they knew it was worth it. And then the world changed. When European colonizers arrived in the Americas, they encountered cassava, and they did not understand it. They saw the complex, labor-intensive process, and they saw the poison. They viewed it as the food of savages, as dangerous and not nutritious. In their eyes, the superior food was wheat. Wheat was the food of Europe, the food of civilization. And so, they began a long and deliberate campaign to replace cassava with wheat. This was not just about food. It was about control. By promoting wheat, they were promoting a European agricultural system, one that they understood and could dominate. They imported wheat, sold it to the colonial elites, and created a system where wheat was the food of the rich and cassava was the food of the poor, the enslaved, and the indigenous. A food that had been a source of pride and self-sufficiency became a symbol of poverty and oppression. This is the threat. The threat was not the poison in the root. The threat was the independence that the root provided. A community that can feed itself from a resilient perennial plant that grows for free in their own backyards is a community that is hard to control. A community that is dependent on imported wheat, on the other hand, is a community that is tied to a global economic system, a system that was and still is controlled by the powerful. And this colonial legacy continues to this day. Look at Nigeria. Nigeria is the world's largest producer of cassava. It is a national treasure, a crop that is perfectly adapted to its climate and its culture. And yet, Nigeria is also one of the world's largest importers of wheat. Millions of dollars flow out of the country every year to buy a grain that is less resilient, less productive, and less suited to the local environment than the crop they already have in abundance. When the war in Ukraine disrupted global wheat supplies, the African Development Bank announced a $1 billion plan to boost wheat production in Africa. $1 billion. Imagine if that money was invested in cassava. Imagine if it was used to support the local farmers, the women processors, the scientists who are working to develop even better varieties of this incredible plant. But the tide is starting to turn. A new generation of scientists, farmers, and entrepreneurs are rediscovering the power of cassava. They are what I call cassava evangelists. People like Chiedozie Egesi, a Nigerian crop scientist who has dedicated his life to this plant. They are using modern science to build on the ancient knowledge of the Amazonian women. They are creating open source databases, like Cassava Base, to share genetic information and accelerate the breeding of new varieties. They are developing cassava that is more nutritious, more disease resistant, and easier to process. And they are fighting back against the dominance of wheat. In Nigeria, the government has mandated that bread must contain at least 20% cassava flour. It is a small step, but it is a powerful one. It is a declaration of food independence. It is a recognition that the future of food is not about a single, globalized crop, but about a diversity of local, resilient, and culturally appropriate foods. So, what does this mean for you? How can you be a part of this story? You can start by looking for cassava in your own life. It is hiding in plain sight. That bag of tapioca pearls in the back of your pantry. The gluten-free flour in the health food aisle. The frozen yucca root in the international section of your grocery store. I encourage you to try it. Make a simple cassava pudding. Try baking with cassava flour. Or be adventurous and find a recipe for fufu or casabe. When you eat it, think about its journey. Think about the 10,000 years of indigenous wisdom that it contains. Think about the colonial powers that tried to suppress it. And think about the billion people who depend on it today. You are not just eating a root. You are tasting a story of resilience, of survival, and of hope. This is the real nature of our food system. It is not just about calories and nutrients. It is about power, about history, and about culture. For every food that is on our plates, there are 100 others that have been forgotten, suppressed, or ignored. The cassava is one of those forgotten treasures that is finally being rediscovered. I want to know what you think. Have you ever eaten cassava, yucca, or manioc? Were you aware of its incredible history? What other foods do you think are hiding in plain sight, waiting to be rediscovered? Share your thoughts and your stories in the comments below. Let's create a community that celebrates the diversity of our food heritage. Thank you for joining. Thank me on this journey. The world is full of plants that have been unfairly judged. But if we are willing to look past the surface, to learn their stories, we can find a world of flavor, nutrition, and wisdom. Until next time, stay curious and never stop questioning the stories you have been told. Let me go deeper into the science of this remarkable plant, because the more you understand it, the more you will appreciate what it represents. Cassava belongs to the spurge family, and its scientific name is Manihot esculenta. It is native to South America, where it was first domesticated in the Amazon basin around 10,000 years ago. From there, it spread throughout the tropical world, carried by traders, colonizers, and enslaved people. Today, it is grown in more than 100 countries, from Nigeria to Thailand, from Brazil to Indonesia. The plant itself is a woody shrub that can grow up to 3 meters tall. It has distinctive, hand-shaped leaves and produces a cluster of starchy roots underground. These roots are the treasure. They can weigh several kilograms each, and they are packed with carbohydrates. In fact, cassava is one of the most efficient producers of carbohydrates in the plant kingdom. A single hectare of cassava can produce over 250,000 calories per day. Compare that to rice, which produces about 176,000 calories per hectare per day. Or wheat, which produces only 110,000. Cassava is, quite simply, a calorie-producing machine. But it is not just about quantity. The quality of cassava's resilience is what makes it truly special. It is incredibly drought-tolerant. While other crops wilt and die when the rains fail, cassava's deep roots can tap into moisture far below the surface. It can survive on as little as 500 millimeters of rainfall per year. It can also tolerate poor, acidic soils that would be useless for other crops. And it is remarkably resistant to pests and diseases, particularly the bitter varieties that contain higher levels of cyanogenic glucosides. This brings us back to the poison. The cyanide in cassava is not there by accident. It is a defense mechanism. The plant produces these toxic compounds to protect itself from being eaten by insects and animals. It is a chemical shield, a way of saying, "Leave me alone." But humans, with their big brains and their stubborn determination, found a way around it. And in doing so, they unlocked a food source that was in many ways more reliable than any other. The processing of cassava is a fascinating example of traditional ecological knowledge. It is not just about removing the poison. It is also about transforming the root into a variety of different products, each with its own flavor, texture, and use. In Brazil, cassava is processed into farinha, a coarse flour that is toasted and used as a topping for beans and rice. It is also used to make tapioca, the starchy pearls that are used in puddings and bubble tea. In West Africa, cassava is pounded into a dough called fufu, which is served with soups and stews. In Southeast Asia, it is often boiled or fried and eaten as a snack. Each of these products requires a slightly different processing method, and each has been refined over centuries of practice. The women who do this work are the keepers of an ancient and invaluable knowledge. They know exactly how long to soak the roots, how fine to grate them, how much pressure to apply. They can tell by the smell, the texture, the color, whether the process is going well. This is not something you can learn from a book. It is something that is passed down from mother to daughter, from generation to generation. And this is why the colonial suppression of cassava was so damaging. It was not just about replacing one crop with another. It was about erasing a whole system of knowledge. When the colonizers promoted wheat, they were also promoting a European way of farming, a European way of eating. They were telling the indigenous people and the enslaved Africans that their knowledge was worthless, that their traditions were primitive. They were trying to sever the connection between people and their food. But they failed. Despite centuries of suppression, cassava survived. It survived because it was too important, too reliable, too deeply woven into the fabric of daily life. The poor and the marginalized continued to grow it, to process it, to eat it. They kept the knowledge alive, and now that knowledge is being recognized for what it always was, a treasure. The modern cassava revolution is being driven by science, but it is rooted in tradition. Scientists are using advanced genetic techniques to identify the genes that make cassava resistant to disease, that make it more nutritious, that make it easier to process. They are creating new varieties that have higher levels of protein and vitamins that are resistant to devastating diseases like cassava, mosaic virus, and cassava brown streak disease. But they are doing this in partnership with farmers, listening to their needs, learning from their experience. One of the most exciting developments is the creation of biofortified cassava. This is cassava that has been bred to contain higher levels of essential nutrients, like vitamin A. Vitamin A deficiency is a major public health problem in many parts of the world, causing blindness and weakening the immune system. By breeding cassava with orange-colored flesh, scientists have created a variety that is rich in beta-carotene, the precursor to vitamin A. This simple change could save millions of lives. There is also research into making cassava processing safer and easier. Traditional processing methods are effective, but they are also time-consuming and labor-intensive. Scientists are developing new techniques that can remove the cyanide more quickly and efficiently, reducing the burden on the women who do this work. They are also developing new products, like high-quality cassava flour, that can be used in a wider range of foods. But perhaps the most important development is the growing recognition of cassava's role in climate adaptation. As the climate changes, droughts are becoming more frequent and more severe. The crops that we have relied on for centuries are struggling to cope, but cassava, with its deep roots and its incredible resilience, is perfectly suited to this new reality. It is a crop that can thrive in the conditions that are becoming more and more common. It is a crop that can provide food security in an uncertain world. This is the message that I want to leave you with. Cassava is not just a food. It is a symbol. It is a symbol of the resilience of the human spirit, of the power of traditional knowledge, of the importance of diversity in our food system. It is a reminder that the best solutions to our problems are often not new inventions, but ancient wisdom that has been forgotten or ignored. So, the next time you see cassava, whether it is in a bag of tapioca pearls or a frozen yucca root, I want you to see it differently. I want you to see the 10,000 years of history that it contains. I want you to see the hands of the women who have processed it, generation after generation. I want you to see the billion people who depend on it for their daily bread. And I want you to see the future, a future where this incredible plant is finally given the respect it deserves. There is one more thing I want to share with you before we close this chapter. It is about the future of cassava and about what it could mean for all of us. Because this is not just a story about the past. It is a story about what is possible. Right now, there are scientists and farmers working together to create what they call the next generation of cassava. They are using the latest tools of modern genetics, but they are guided by the wisdom of the people who have grown this plant for millennia. They are not trying to create something new from scratch. They are trying to unlock the potential that has always been there, hidden in the genes of this remarkable plant. One of the most promising areas of research is in the development of cassava that can be processed more easily. Traditional processing can take several days, but scientists are now working on varieties with lower levels of cyanogenic glucosides, varieties that can be processed more quickly and safely. And then there is the question of nutrition. While cassava is an excellent source of carbohydrates, it is relatively low in protein and other essential nutrients. This is a concern in regions where cassava is a major part of the diet, as it can lead to malnutrition. But scientists are working to address this. They are breeding varieties that are higher in protein, that contain more vitamins and minerals. They are also promoting the consumption of cassava leaves, which are a rich source of protein, iron, and vitamins, but are often discarded or underutilized. The story of cassava is far from over. It is a story that is still being written by the scientists in their labs, by the farmers in their fields, and by the families who sit down to eat it every day. It is a story of hope, of resilience, and of the enduring power of nature to provide for us, if only we are wise enough to listen. What do you think? Are there other foods that have been unfairly suppressed or forgotten? Leave a comment below. Thank you for being here. Until next time, stay curious and never stop exploring.